Hello, my name is the Reluctant Brony, and here I am to offer you my first video. This is going to be an audiobook, basically, of some of the fanfics of MLP, which I thoroughly enjoy. Now, this is going to be a fanfic called Faith and Doubt. This is made by Defender2222, or 2222. And this is where the story starts. With, in the beginning of each chapter, there is a quote which kind of is significant to read, but it's not very significant and it's not a necessity. Okay. But who knows what she spoke to the darkness, alone, in the bitter watches of the night, when all her life seemed shrinking, and the walls of her bower closing in about her, a hutch to trammel some wild thing in. Aragorn, the Return of the King. Twilight didn't have any tears left. She wished she did, as it would mean that she had something else to focus on. Tears would have been welcomed at this point. Compared to what she suffered through now, of course whippings would have been nicer than what she was going through. But there is nothing to distract her from the absolute mess she had made of things, and how her actions, as well intended as they were, had cost her all her friends and her family. How did it all go so wrong? She wondered to herself as she lay curled up in her bed. The dress rehearsal for the wedding had been a nightmare for every pony involved, though she, compared to every other pony, had a different reasons for being upset. Their hateful words buzzed through her brain like angry wasps, bouncing up against her skull and making her head throb. As Twilight lay in her bed, her eyes aching from all the tears she had shed, and her throat made raw from the sobs, she replayed that awful moment again and again, like a play that would just never end. Shining Armor, her brother, her best friend, who had always looked at her with love, had glared at her and dismissed her warnings as those as a fool crying wolf. She had nearly ruined his wedding, and he had responded by stripping her of her best mare title, banishing her from the event with all the cruelty he could muster. He had looked upon her like one would an insect, and for the first time in her life, Twilight had feared him. He cut me out of his life. He trusts some mare he barely knows over me. He was my best friend, and he cast me away so easily. Don't I mean anything to him? And yes, I am not going to do voices to personify them, but I would try. Maybe. Possibly. Nah. Celestia, her beloved mentor, had looked at her with such disappointment that Twilight had wanted to crawl into a hole and die. The princess had put so much trust in her, and she had blown it. This was such an important event for the princess, and there Twilight was, screaming her head off and being a general pain in the flank. And she had shown just how irrational she could be. She couldn't tell a headache-relieving spell from a mind control spell. She could almost see it in Princess Celestia's eyes. How could some pony be so stupid? She regrets taking me as her student. The only reason she keeps me around is because I'm one of the elements. I'm only useful as a weapon she points at her enemies. Her friends had just shook their heads, walking past her as they digested the fact that she had gone through yet another freakout over something silly and had failed to listen to their advice. They had warned her and pleaded with her to think things through. There was stupid Twilight Sparkle, overreacting again. She had nearly ruined the big day, and this time they refused to bail her out. But it wasn't a silly thing, and I wasn't overreacting. Cadence is hurting my brother. How could they not understand? Wouldn't they have done the same? Haven't they done the same in the past? Twilight shook her head, trying to banish the dark thoughts that were beginning to swirl about her. They were always taunting her, making her doubt herself and her actions. But normally she was able to push them aside, to think logically. But tonight, after all the drama and the heartache, they were beating a steady war drum. Been repressing these thoughts for so long, shoving them back into the smallest corners of her mind. It was wrong of her to feel this way, to have so much doubt in her friends and family. They weren't to blame. She was. Twilight felt so very, very tired. She thought, for only a moment, about seeking out Princess Celestia and apologizing for her rash words and actions. But as she reached the corner that led to Cadence's private wing, Twilight had found herself unable to continue. She just couldn't face the bride, couldn't deal with another set of eyes glaring at her. Or maybe I just know she's an evil witch, and I don't want to be within 10 feet of her, something within her mind whispered. So she had run to her room, ignoring the guards that called out for her to halt. They all had glared at her, knowing what she had done. Or maybe they had been calling out to ask if she was okay, not used to seeing a crying mirror. No. They knew, and they hated her for breaking Cadence's heart and making her cry. Of course they'd take her side. She was Princess Cadence, and Twilight was just Twilight. The stupid filly Celestia humored. So she had bolted into her room, sealing the door with magic and soundproofing the entire bedroom so she didn't have to hear any more incriminating jabs. Then she shut the drapes and begun to sob. Every time she had managed to catch her breath, she had seen a sliver of moonlight, and she had worked to cover up the offending, or was it offended by her actions? Light. To cover up the offending light. What I just said, like in a weird voice, was in parentheses. Okay. She'd finally stripped her bed clean and jammed the dress Rarity had made for her to seal up the crack underneath the door so that she was left alone in the darkness. It wasn't like she needed the dress. She wasn't invited to the wedding anymore after all. And whose fault is that? Mine? She pondered. Or all my friends and family who side with that witch instead of listening to me? The unicorn did her best to bat away the incrimination of her loved ones. It was her fault they hadn't believed her. She had come in acting foolish, ranting, raving, and how could they ever believe her? She should have done it differently. She should have found another way to convince them about the danger Cadence posed. She should have sat down with them and gently explained what she feared and what she saw, and asked them to please help her. Of course, that's assuming they would have believed me, the bitter voice within her head muttered. She quietly begged the voice to shut up, and their reactions to her rant shouldn't have surprised her. Shining had been hurt that she had made a scene instead of seeing him in private. Celestia was caught between her niece and her student, left in the worst of positions. Her friends had tried to help her, and when she had ignored their advice, they had left, assuming that was all she had wanted. It was her fault. It was her fault. It was. No, I can keep telling myself that, but it will never make it true. The harsh voice in her head was growing stronger, refusing to let her forgive them all so easily, denying her the chance to take on the blame. I sound like a silly filly, protesting that Santa Claus must be real. Whoops. I know the truth, but I refuse to admit it. She had lowered her head, feeling absolutely miserable. They care more about the wedding than me. She had waited for the tears to come. She waited for her heart to break and her soul to be crushed. And she waited and waited but it never came. The dark thoughts that rolled through her body no longer seemed heavy. Indeed, the more she thought about it, the more mad she got. My friends want to put a big wedding and have every pony compliment them. That's all that matters to them. The entire train ride here, they knew I was upset, but they didn't offer sympathy. They gave excuses and told me to cheer up. She glowered a bit, remembering how the ghosts had gossiped about the wedding and their tasks. They had never once given pause to remember that Twilight had found out about it about the same time they did, via a form letter. They had seen her shock, heard her sing her heart out about her brother, and they had been all